Let's get started. Oh me. We're in Luke chapter 2 to begin tonight. We're looking at angel stories in the New Testament, and last couple of weeks we've looked at the angel visit to Zechariah. That was Angel Gabriel. Remember Gabriel? Zechariah starts questioning him, how will I know what you're saying is true? And Gabriel kind of got upset with him and says, I'm Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God. You won't speak until everything I've said comes to pass. Then we talked last time about the message to Mary and to Joseph, how that both of them, they were a little different from Zechariah. They weren't questioning the authority or the message of the angel. They were just puzzled. And they were both young people trying to do the right thing, and the angel dealt with them differently than Zechariah was dealt with. In Luke chapter 2, we see a different kind of an angel story. Luke chapter 2, starting in verse 8. There were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. Now, this story is the story that leads us to be pretty certain that Christmas was not when Jesus was born. In fact, some scholars believe that what was happening here was that these shepherds were probably some of the shepherds that were watching over the flocks that would have been taken into the temple for temple sacrifice, and most of those lambs were born in the spring. And the best of those lambs, they really went to long, great distances to make their lambs the very best for the sacrifice to God. They would put a form of socks on their legs, and they were very careful to not let them get scratched or cut by any kind of bramble bushes. They were always fed very well. They were always kept very close, and so if that's true, I don't know that it is, but I want it to be. If it is true, then what you've got is you've got shepherds who were watching the lambs that would be sacrificed for people's sin, and an angel announcing to them that a different kind of lamb was being born to take care of people's sin in a much better way than their little lambs would ever be able to. And that's just kind of a neat idea. But this is the story that makes us pretty sure he wasn't born in the middle of winter. But that being said, I don't think that it's ever wrong to talk about Jesus. And when you've got the majority of people who don't even go to church thinking about Jesus on a particular day or a particular time of year, I'm all for talking about Jesus. I don't think it's ever wrong to talk about Jesus. And if that's what it takes to get that little edge, that little break into their life, into their mind, hey Lee, then I'm all for that. I think it's a great thing. I'm not against talking about Jesus at Christmas time, but he probably was not born in December. It's because of this story. They were watching their flocks at night. The weather would have allowed them to be out with these flocks. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. Yeah, Roy.
The shepherds that were out there, would they have been like the younger children as the shepherds? From what I've heard, that usually the adult males are out there during the daytime.
Yeah, see, I'm not sure exactly. My guess would be it would depend on what these lambs were going to be used for in the future. If they truly were the lambs that were destined for sacrifice at the temple, they would have been worth a lot of money, and so Dad probably wouldn't have left boys, even teenage boys, to look out for them, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
From some studies that we've done with Jewish tradition, said that it was Levitical shepherds that were watching those.
Yeah.
And that they used that old robes and stuff from service in the temple to wrap them and things.
Yeah, they would have been really carefully watched and taken care of if they were, in fact, being raised for the temple sacrifices. So once again, this is one of those things that the Bible doesn't clearly tell us. And if you see it differently, if someone else sees it differently, they're not my enemy. We can still be friends. But as Michael Card says, I really want that to be true because it just makes a really great story. And it wouldn't surprise me at all for God to be working at that level of weaving in human existence. One of the things that's interesting to talk about here is the glory of the Lord. If you study in the Old Testament, the idea of the glory of the Lord, the Hebrew word was the Shekinah, the Shekinah glory of the Lord. Some of the most well-known passages that talk about it are like when Moses came down from the mountain, and it says that his face shone so brightly that the people were afraid, and that he had to put a veil over his face until that, whatever that was that caused his face to shine, faded away the longer he was back off of the mountain. That all refers to the Old Testament view of the Shekinah, the glory of God. There's something...
I think that would have been at the resurrection also.
Would have been at the resurrection also. Those Roman soldiers that were just stunned into catatonia. You know, there was something about the glory of the Lord, and so you think we use the word glory in kind of a random kind of a way. We don't think of it the same way that the Jewish people would have thought about the glory of the Lord. The glory of the Lord was not just that God was glorious, but there was something about God's interactions with humans, whether it was through angels in their full form or Moses at the burning bush or Moses on top of Mount Sinai, or there's other places all through Scripture. Just keep in the back of your mind that when you see the phrase, the glory of the Lord, it's not like we as Americans think, oh, hey, that was a pretty glorious race, right? Man, my team won that Super Bowl. That was a glorious game. Well, that's how we use the word, but for them it would have had a much deeper, more powerful meaning, and that's kind of what this story shows us. These shepherds saw the glory of the Lord. Somehow there was something they saw, and it scared them. It frightened them to death. And so when that happens, what's the first word that the angels always say? Don't be afraid. See, if a fearful human can't truly focus on and take in the message that God wants them to have, right? And so John tells us in 1 John that perfect love casts out all fear. And Paul tells us that we're not given a spirit of timidity or of fear, but one of judgment and sound mind. God doesn't want you to be fearful. The fear, according to the Bible, is the beginning of knowledge. It is the beginning of wisdom. It is the beginning of a relationship with God. But it's only supposed to be the beginning. And if the best you can do is, I'll obey God because I'm afraid of Him, that's a good start. And if that's the best you can do, and if that's as far as you've progressed in your relationship with Him, I think grace will cover the rest and you'll be just fine. But what God really wants is He wants you to move past the being frozen by fear to a deep, abiding respect that causes you to willingly work in concert with Him. That's what He's looking for. God likes to work in community. He works with us and through us and in us. And that's what Jesus came to do. Jesus came to be God among humans. And so you've got in the Old Testament, when God interacts with people, whether it's through an angel or with His presence, this Shekinah glory is just overwhelming. And if an angel is involved, the angel settles people down because angels do what? They carry messages from God. And humans can't fully take in the depth of a message if they're so frightened that they're almost catatonic. And so angels will always start, if that's happening with the humans, they're thoughtful about their audience, is my point. They don't just come and half-heartedly mumble. It's not like Jonah, in the city of Nineveh. 7 days, how many days it was, and then it was going to be overthrown. Jonah would have loved to see that city overthrown. He wasn't the most inspiring orator when he went through and gave God's message to those people. And that's not the way angels are. Angels don't just kind of half-hearted mail it in, right? They don't just, half-hearted do what God asked them to do. And so on the one hand, they've got to represent and tell what God has said, but in their interfacing with humans, they've got to make sure that humans at least have the ability or the mindset to get it. And once they've got it, the angel's done and it's between you and God then, right? But angels make sure that people, hey, listen now, stop. Don't get so overwhelmed now. I got something I got to tell you. I can't leave you until I get this through at least inside your skull. So don't be afraid. Be not afraid. Don't be afraid. So he tells these shepherds, don't be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. And so I preached a sermon about this last Christmas. I believe that this was the first gospel sermon. Not the first gospel sermon in the church. That was Acts chapter 2, verse 38. Peter preached that sermon. But this was the first gospel sermon. Well, what do I mean by gospel? Well, I mean the way Paul defines the word gospel. Paul says that the gospel, or that the good news from God, is the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus, and our response to it. That's the gospel. And if what a church teaches, or what a Bible teacher teaches, or what a preacher says, if it's not framed as good news, if it's framed in the gloom and doom and the fear and all that kind of stuff, it might be a biblical message, it might even be a godly message, but it can't be a gospel message unless it's good news. And it's one of those things that I think we as Christians sometimes forget, or we don't think about it much, but we're involved in the good news business. We're ambassadors for good news. We're to be the bodily representatives of a God that sends good news into people's lives. And so we need to be good news kind of people. We need to be the kind of people that when others interact with us, after interacting with us, they're in a better frame of mind. They're in a better state of life. Something has improved in their life, even if it's just a little bit. That's what Jesus talks about, things like being the salt of the earth, the light of the world, being a city set on a hill. Paul tells the people in Corinth and 2 Corinthians that we are ambassadors for Christ. There's got to be a good news component, or it's not really the gospel. It could be true. It could even be biblical. But we need to be good news kind of people. We don't need to be gloom and doom, weaned on a sour pickle kind of a people. Jesus said, I came to give you life, and life more abundantly. And we should be abundant life kind of people. We should enjoy the life that God has given us. We should be quick to laugh, quick to tell a joke. That was one of the things that set Jesus apart from the other rabbis of his day. Was he went to parties. His first miracle, for crying out loud, was what? He turned water into wine, and he was about enjoying life. He was about being that embodiment of the glory, the Shekinah glory of God. When he walked into a room, the room lit up. When he spoke, people listened. Children flocked around him, to the point that his disciples sometimes were saying, get away, he's trying to work. And Jesus said, no, don't do that. Don't keep little kids from me. That's probably the best part of his day, was dealing with kids, after dealing with those knot-headed disciples who, every time he went someplace, he came back. And notice, every time he comes back to the disciples, he asks them, what were you arguing about? It's over. He says it many times. What were you arguing about? Well, why would he talk to them about that? Because what he wanted them to be was, he wanted them to be good news kind of people. And that's what the angel was about. He says today, I bring you good news of great joy. And it will be for all people. We won't talk about that, but maybe I'll just mention it. The whole idea of the nations. The gospel is not just for Jews. It's for all people. And that's even true of the law of Moses and other things. God's dealings with humans have always been for all people. He dealt with people differently where they are. He dealt with the Jews differently than he dealt with the Gentiles. But his goal was not to tell the world the Jews are the only good people and everybody else can take a flying leap. No. Even in the Old Testament, God was a God of grace and mercy, and his goal was to use the Jewish people as salt and light, as good news people in their world. He wanted people to see that there were really good reasons for being part of that group. And that you wanted to be a part of that group. And you should feel like you were missing something really great if you were not part of that group. And that's what churches are supposed to be. People should feel like they're missing out on something. That's part of that good news thing, see? And it's for all people. So he says, today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign for you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger is the word we use. What's another word or phrase for a manger? A feed trough. Yeah. See, he says this will be a sign for you. Why? It wouldn't be a sign if there wasn't something unusual. It's not unusual to see a baby wrapped in a blanket. It is unusual to see a baby wrapped in a blanket stuck in a feed trough in a barn. That's unusual.
Isn't it the ideal, it's one of the things I wanted to be true, is that the manger could have been the stables for the Levitical priesthood for the baby.
Could have been. It could have either been the stables for the Levitical lambs. It could have been that many of the Israelite houses were built in such a way that you lived upstairs and the animals lived downstairs. You didn't have like we have here where you got a house and a barn. They didn't do that. You live upstairs and on the roof, and underneath your house is, instead of a place to park your car, you had a barn to park your animals. And you would bring your animals in. And so some of those things, some of the stories Jesus tell, for example, where the guy has some company come and he doesn't have anything to feed them, so he goes to his neighbor and he bangs on the guy's door, and the guy says, "Go away. I've put my flocks away. My children are in bed. My household." Well, why would that be a big deal? Well, it wouldn't if you had a house and a barn. But if you had a big sleeping room that everybody was in, and you had to get through the sleeping kids to the stairs that went down to the barn before you could let somebody in. By the time you got to the door and let somebody in, now the whole house is woke. All your animals are awake. The kids are awake. And it's like, go away. Everybody's in bed. See, all of a sudden it makes a lot of sense. So it was either a feed trough for the Levitical lambs, or it's talking about when Mary... When Mary came into the town for the census, they didn't have hotels. Hotels were Greek things. And when the disciples were going into the Greek world, Jesus told them, take a sword. That wasn't the way the Hebrews did things. Hebrews, everything, you were all part of the family, even if you didn't know. You were a distant cousin, and so you come to my house because I would be a horrible person if I didn't let you come into my house. So they get to town and all the sleeping areas are taken. And so somebody tells them, well, I don't have a place for you to sleep, but I got room downstairs. You know, it's not like sticking you out in a drafty barn someplace. It's still into the house, you know. So it depends on how, we just don't know the details about these things. But the sign was, a wrapped baby is normal. A wrapped baby in a animal's food trough, wherever that trough was, in what we would call the first floor of a house or in a stables for the temple, that's not normal. You don't put newborn babies in a dirty feed trough. But you do if that's the best you can do. That's better than out in the open. That's better than out under a bush someplace. There's a little more protection. There's a little more privacy. There's a little more whatever, you know. But that would be a sign. It's, well, who in their right mind would have a baby in a barn? Well, a mother that was in labor and had no other option. That would be a sign, right? This will be a sign to you, he says. Verse 13, suddenly a great company of, and the New International Version says, the heavenly host appeared with the angel. Somebody have a different translation with a different wording? A multitude of what?
A multitude of the heavenly army of angels.
Okay. A multitude of the heavenly army of angels. Yeah, that would be that would be a different way to say it.
How does that word multitude
I'm not sure what the Greek word is, but a multitude is a lot.
Yeah, because I mean, whenever you picture it 6 or 12. You don't picture 150 angels up there. So, I mean, I'm just curious.
My image has always been of thousands. My mind, and it's just my mind, it's not Bible, but a multitude to me would be the dark night was all of a sudden filled. Like a heavenly choir. A multitude would be like what you would find at a big ball game in a big stadium. That's one of the things, one of the images that John has of God's throne room in the book of Revelation is that there are multitudes, he says, of angels and then of God's people in these concentric circles around the throne. And, the idea is that it's like the ball game of all ball games. It's the rock concert of all rock concerts, and you don't want to miss it. You want to be in the crowd and be able to say, I was there. I couldn't even hear myself talk. It was so many of them. And that's the picture I have of this. Maybe your picture's a little bit different, but the idea still is a multitude. There's an angel speaking, and then there's a multitude of a heavenly host. We've seen in some of the Old Testament stories about God's heavenly host. In the book of Job, it's God's heavenly host that comes and is a part of this heavenly council, this spiritual council that he has that Satan comes into and starts to talk to him about. It's just kind of a beautiful picture. It's kind of a beautiful picture. And the idea is that, from the beginning of human time, once Adam and Eve sinned, God planned from then to do what he was going to do. And time is nothing for God. A day is like 1,000 years, 1,000 years one day. But from the human side of things, there was a couple of thousand years there or more, depending on how much time there was in the beginning of the book of Genesis. There was this plan. God put this plan together, and he had angels that interceded with humans to move this plan forward and get certain things done. And there were mileposts, the law of Moses and Abraham and all these other kind of signposts on the road. And all of a sudden, this is what they've been working towards. This is what they've been coming to. And I can just imagine, how it would be. Have you ever been a part of a celebration that just made your skin tingle, made the goosebumps come up on your arms and the back of your neck? Some people never have. I'm always amazed at people. I never have done that before. Whether it's a thing with a school, maybe it's a homecoming for a church, maybe it's some milestone in a community. I remember as a boy, a lot of communities had big super celebrations for the United States bicentennial. The town I was a boy in Amarillo, Texas, we had a huge bicentennial celebration where, it seemed like the whole town showed up. I'm sure there were people that didn't show up, but it just seemed like the whole town showed up. And when the band that was performing that one night started singing the Star Spangled Banner, and everybody stood, you could hear thousands of people stand, and they all started singing it. It was like this. You can't, if you haven't been a part of something like that, it's hard to describe it. But that's the picture that's here. These shepherds are being given a heavenly concert by a heavenly choir, being led by this front man angel who's just said, "Don't be afraid. This is good news." And it's not just good news for people on the earth. It's also good news for all these heavenly beings that have been working with God for all these years. It's just a great image. It's just a great image. And I think about those kind of things, for example, on Sunday morning when we get together and the song leader stands up and says, our first song will be song number whatever. And I just thought of an example. I went to the International Soul Winning Workshop when I was a kid. They quit doing those in Tulsa a few years ago. But at that time, they were the largest gathering of Churches of Christ people in the country. And we would go. And they would set up the big meetings in the evening in the big fairground building. And I still remember the first time I ever sang the song, "There is a God, He is alive." And everybody had it was like a paper sheet that was stuck into the songbooks that everybody had because it was a brand new song. At least it was brand new for our fellowship at that time. And the song leader kind of went through it the first time, and everybody stopped and said, "Okay, now let's stand up and really sing it." And everybody stood. And we got to that chorus where I'd been raised in a church where, it wasn't all that manly to sing. And so in our church I grew up with, when young boys would lead singing, there was always a couple of older women in the back who really were the song leaders. But they sat in the back, and if the song got too draggy, there'd be some older woman in the back on that wooden floor that would do this. And if the boy started the song and it was on the wrong note, there were a couple of old women who would sing out very loudly and put you on the right note so that everybody could sing with them, right? That's the way that's the kind of church I was raised in. It always struck me as strange that they wanted those women to keep silent in the church, but boy, that was okay, And I thought it was okay too, because I preferred singing good songs. At this big Tulsa workshop, you didn't have to do that. Everybody stood, and it was the first time in my life that I heard a whole army of men. See, we do that on Sunday morning here. That's one of the things I love about this church is we men sing. It's not just the women that sing, we men sing. And when you sing a song with a man's part, it's not just the song leader trying to figure out how to get past that part so the women can be heard. We actually sing. And yet there's still people who, they come in and they're kind of sleepy and they stand around, they look and they listen and they go home for dinner and they say, "Hey, the singing wasn't all that good today." If we were part of one of those heavenly hosts declaring good news, the point wouldn't be how good the song service was or wasn't. The point would be, could I sing at the top of my voice out of tune and nobody hear it because everybody else was doing the same thing? I love hearing little children sometimes. We'll sing songs and they'll be at the top of their voice. They'll be out of tune and they'll be louder than everybody else, but I'm saying, yes. Jesus says, "Let the little children come to me." Why? Because of that. He says, you won't find the kingdom of God unless you become like a little child. What does that mean? It means singing like that. It means approaching God like that. Having that kind of a good news thing about you. And anyway, it says that they were saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, on earth, peace to those on whom his favor rests." When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, see, there's where we know that it was a multitude of angels because there was an angel that was the messenger. So what's this heavenly host thing? Well, it's angels. At least my translation has S on the word angels. When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem." Why would they go to Bethlehem? All right. Now, that was the city of David. That's the point. The name Bethlehem actually means house of bread. Bet is house. Lechem is bread. The house of bread. And so there's some stories that Jesus tells that have to do with bread that I think in his mind he's probably thinking back to some of the pieces of bread that he would have seen cooked in the clay ovens around the city of David that he was born in and would have been to as a man. Anyway, they went to Bethlehem because Bethlehem was the city of David. And Jerusalem became the capital or the place that David ruled the kingdom from. But the town of Bethlehem was always known as the city of David. And it's kind of like saying, let's go to the city of Offutt. There is no city of Offutt. But anybody that knows military history knows, especially Air Force history, knows that Offutt Air Force Base is just outside of Omaha and Bellevue, particularly, but Omaha, right? So you could say, well, let's say when somebody says, let's go to Offutt. Well, they could mean a military flight into the to the base, or they could mean a civilian flight into the airport. See, same kind of thing. It's like my point is we still do the same kind of thing, where there are place names, there are actual names, and there are things that places are known for. And that's kind of one of these situations. Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about. So what are they looking for when they leave? Yeah, they're looking for a baby that's been wrapped up, normal, in a manger, unnormal.
So I have a question about that.
Okay.
I imagine there might have been other babies being born that night.
Maybe.
So the sign would have been the child in the manger, obviously wrapped up, because all of them wrapped up.
Sure. He's not an abandoned child. He's not being abused by his parents. He's not being neglected by people. He's obviously being cared for and loved. But
So I can't imagine, they could have gone right to the right house. So they weren't guided like the wise men.
yeah, the wise men were kind of guided. But these guys would have had to go to town and said, you guys know anything about a baby being born tonight? No? Okay.
I mean,
They
they would have looked.
would have looked. They would have had to ask
I
people.
think it's that's why I wanted it to be the manger that the Levitical priests have, because that would have been the main
That would have
stable
been,
and table.
that could have been, it could have, if it was a Levitical manger, then that would have been their office, where they punched in and put out of the.
Bethlehem really wasn't that big. You could have just walked in and heard
Yeah.
a baby crying.
They could have just heard a baby crying. Oh, that's not a baby that's inside. Where's that cry coming from? Maybe. I mean, all these things are the silence of Scripture. We don't know. But we're invited by Scripture. We're given enough details in Scripture to invite us in with our imagination. We should study the Bible with an informed imagination. It shouldn't just be complete imagination and whatever you want it to be. But there's pieces of the stories that are left out, and I think they're left out on purpose, because God is inviting us to interact with Him and to interact with His Word at the level of our emotions. We're to love the Lord our God how? With all of our heart, and with all of our soul, and with all of our mind and strength. 1/4 mind, 3/4 other stuff, right? And that's another thing I think we kind of mess up sometimes, is we want to interact with God just at the level of the mind, and it's more to it than that.
It's interesting because the things that are not in the story are the star,
Yeah.
the wise men.
In this story, yeah.
And whenever you read it or see a movie about it, you always have the star, the wise men, the shepherd, the angels.
Yeah, they're all kind of condensed.
They're all together.
Yeah.
That's why without the star in this story here, you gather the impression that those were two separate incidents: the birth of Jesus and the arrival of.
Yeah, there could have very well been a bunch of days between.
2 years.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So,
And also, these shepherds, regardless of the sheep, whether they were for the sacrifice or not, they're still important.
yes,
They didn't even think twice about leaving them,
yes.
because then they're fair game to.
Yes, whether they're sacrificial sheep or not, they're still a form of your riches. They're still a form of your 401k. They're still a form of your bank account. And they didn't think too much about leaving them. Now, whether they took them back to the Levitical, whatever they did, they probably took care of it. But the point was, however many there were out watching them, there weren't that many when the rest of them went. Maybe they all went. We don't know. Once again, the story doesn't tell us. But it's interesting. They thought it was of greater value to go find this baby in a manger than to protect what was part of their money and their income. And that's a great point. That's a great point. Verse 16, so they hurried off and they found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what they had been told, what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. Now, once again, that's the information. Imagine it in your mind. They've left their flocks, they found the baby, and the Bible story skips what happened while they were there and jumps to when they leave the baby, what do? Oh man, we left our flocks. We got to rush back before the wolf gets them. No. As they left, they did what? They were telling people about what had happened to them. See, and that's the point I think that so many modern day Christians miss about being good news kind of people. You don't need a theological degree. You don't need to be able to answer all the Bible questions. In fact, you don't even need to be able to answer any Bible question. But you should be able to tell what happened to you. You should be able to tell your story because it's your story. And somebody said, well, what if they ask me a question I don't know the answer to? Well, so what? People are always asking questions there's no answers to. I get tons of questions I don't know the answers to. Had a bunch of them tonight. I don't know the answers to all these questions. Being good news people doesn't mean being an expert with your head, although your head is involved. We love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. The mind is important. We don't just have a lobotomy. God doesn't just tell us to take it out of our brain and just be mindless robots. That is a part of it. We should be students of the Word. The Word should be part of us, but it's 1 out of 4, right? And so the Bible tells us that we need to be able to give an answer to those who ask for the joy or for the experience, or however this word is translated, that we have experienced. You need to be able to tell people what you've done. And so there's the story, for example, where Jesus healed the guy had been lame from birth. And the temple officials don't like it, so they bring him and his parents in. They're grilling them. Who was this guy? What was his authority? What did he say? Why'd you let him do that to you? And I love the guy's final answer. Finally, he says, I don't know about anything about all that, but I know this. He healed me, right? The guy says, I don't know about all that, but I was blind, now I see. I don't know all the scripture, I don't know all, but something happened to me, right? I was lame, but now I can walk. I can tell you that.
These shepherds were the same. I mean, they were Jews, and one of the things that basically a Jew would know, if he didn't know a whole lot else, was the Messiah is coming.
Yes.
And they just got told the
Messiah is here.
And, that would be probably the most exciting thing that ever happened.
It would be the biggest thing that ever happened to them in their lives. They would have expected that kind of a message to be given at the temple to the big shots, not to the guys looking after sheep at night. These were the janitors. These were the cleanup people. These were the lower levels of society, and they didn't expect great things happen to them. And they saw not only one angel, but a whole host of them, and the angels did a concert for them. And they go and find exactly what the angel said: a baby wrapped, normal, in a manger, not normal. What he said happened. I don't understand. I don't know. You Pharisees say there's angels. You Sadducees say there's not. I don't know what the Bible says about that, but I know I saw something, and I heard something, and it scared me to death at the start, and I did what they said to do, and I saw what they said I'd see, and here's what happened to me. See, we can do that. You don't have to be brilliant to do that. But you got to be convinced that what happened to you was good. You got to be convinced that it's better than the new car that you bought, or the new house you're going to buy, or the new grandbaby that was born. It's got to be at that same level of good news, right? And people tell by our actions, they say, well, he's not all this much smarter than me, but he's wound up about something. Yeah, we ought to be wound up about something.
The angel doesn't tell them to go spread news.
No.
But they want it.
See, good news, you just spread good news. It's good news that my younger daughter's having a baby. You didn't have to ask me, when's that daughter going to have a baby? As soon as I knew, I told you. I got another grandbaby coming. You don't have to be told to tell good news, right? You know, I thought I was going to owe a bunch of my taxes this year, but I got some money coming back. You don't have to ask me about my taxes. I'll tell you if it's good, if I think it's good, if I'm convinced that it's good. You'll say, boy, I wish I was getting money back, right? So anyhow, that's the kind of stuff that we see in this story, is that these angelic messengers from God come to these shepherds, and they're just working class people. They're not the brilliant people, they're not the rich people, they're not the powerful people. God chooses them to be the first non-family to know that all this stuff we've been planning for, tonight's the night. Think about all the people that went to bed that night and never knew, never heard. For them, it was just another night. I guarantee you these shepherds, for the rest of their life, they could be old grandpa sitting on the front porch and say, boy, let me tell you what happened to me one day. I was about your age. My daddy had me out taking care of the flocks. See, once again, this is the imagination, right? The Bible does, but you can picture it because that's the way humans are. My daddy had me out taking care of the flocks. I didn't want to do it. But I sure am glad I was there that night. You know what happened to me, boy? Can't you just hear that? I know that's what happened. I know that's what happened. The angel didn't say, oh, by the way, tell your grandkids when you get old what happened. No. It's not required. It shouldn't be required for Christians to be told, be good news people. We shouldn't have to be told that. We shouldn't have to be told, well, you know, this is a really good deal in your life, so you ought to be able to tell other people about what's happened to you. Even if you can't answer all the questions, you ought to be able to work up a little enthusiasm about the greatest deal in the century, you know. What other ideas do you get from this angel story? Anything you want to talk about?
Well, I don't know if you already covered this because I came late, but the idea that the angels came to the lowest of the people, not the highest, or the people in charge of the temple.
Yes.
Any of those people, they came to the common, ordinary folk.
Yes. And when God got ready to send his son, his first crib was about as low as you could get and still be in civilization, right? Yeah. Don't forget that God has always been concerned for the poor. God has always been concerned for the down and out. Do a study sometime of what the Bible says, Bible-wide, about dealing with widows and orphans. Children who don't have parents, or don't, specifically in the old systems, don't have fathers, or women who don't have husbands, or who had husbands but now are on their own. That was about the worst thing that could happen to you. And God has always been very, very concerned about those people. And we as his people should be very concerned about those people. We should be eager to feed the hungry. Well, what about that verse in James where it says, if a man won't work, neither let him eat? What about his wife and kids, if nothing else? You know, if there's kids involved, fine. Yeah. Listen, Jesus fed lots of people. Most of them were not interested in what he had to say. And when his messages got difficult, they all started staying away even from the food. He turns to his disciples and says, they all left. Are you going to leave me too? And loudmouth Peter speaks up and says, where are we going to go? We've left everything to follow you. You know, God is always concerned with the down and out. And we see that even from the beginning of Jesus' ministry, before he even had a ministry. His birth and the announcement of his birth focused on people that are down and out. And anybody else? Okay, let's move on to Matthew chapter 2. Interestingly, if you want to see everything that the Bible says about the birth of Jesus, you have to look in two books, not just one. You have to look in the book of Matthew, and you have to look in the book of Luke. The book of Matthew sometimes talks about things from the standpoint of Jewish faith. Basically, the book of Matthew was written to answer the question, who am I now? And that question would have been asked by Jewish believers in God after the destruction of Jerusalem. And so the question was, if there's no temple, if I don't have a place, if I can't worship, who am I? Why am I here? You know, Greeks ask the same question, but it's from a beginning point, a different beginning point. And the book of Matthew was written to believers in God who said, this is who you are. You're salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. You're a city set on a hill. All the Beatitudes are, this is who you are if you're truly a person of God. These are who you are and have nothing to do with whether you're rich or poor, have nothing to do with whether you've got a home or not. It has nothing to do with whether your homeland has been attacked or you're now temple-less and religion-less. It doesn't matter if all your life and all your family has always been tied around your religion and your religion is now gone. This is who you are. And so those are the kind of questions that he's answering with the story of Jesus. Luke is doing a different thing. Dr. Luke was a Gentile. He was a traveling companion of Paul. And Luke claimed that what he did was that he carefully researched, O Theophilus, all the things that Jesus began to do and teach. And so you've got the book of Luke, and volume 2 is the book of Acts. They're the two books that actually go together if you want to read volume 1 and 2. And so what you've got Luke doing is you've got Luke, who would have not been a part of any of this, would not have been a part of the ministry of Jesus, would have not been a part of anything until later he became a Christian, maybe with the teaching of the Apostle Paul, definitely with his mentoring. He went along behind. He would ask people, what happened? What'd you see? He had to interview Mary to get some of the things that he knew about Mary's story. He had to interview some of Jesus' brothers to know what happened about some of these little stories. He says, I researched these things very carefully. I think that's the word he used, carefully. So you have to go back and forth between these two books. And so some of those angel stories we just looked at were, we just looked at that last one was from the book of Luke. But most of the angel stories Matthew has to do with them. And I think that's interesting because Matthew would have been a Jew, but he would have been a down-and-out Jew. What did Matthew do as a profession when Jesus found him? He was a tax collector. He was a traitor to his people. People spit at him and threw rocks at him and hated him because he was a sellout to the Romans. And he had Roman soldiers who could enforce the taxes that he levied on them. And nobody likes the tax man. Nobody likes the IRS. You especially don't like the IRS if there's somebody with an AK-47 standing there saying, pay up. Well, I don't have the cash. Well, you better get it. Sundown's coming. Nobody likes those kind of situations, and that's what Matthew was. Matthew was a down-and-out Jew. He was a marginalized Jew. He was a sellout Jew, but he was still a Jew. And interestingly, it's Matthew that talks the most about angels with the birth of Jesus, which leads me to believe that his background was probably more Pharisaical than Sadducee. Can you remember how the difference between a Pharisee and a Sadducee? It's pretty simple. The Sadducees were sad, you see, because they didn't believe in the resurrection, they didn't believe in miracles, and they didn't believe in angels. And the Sanhedrin, the great council at the temple, was not half Republican and half Democrat. It was generally half Sadducee and half Pharisee. And so you find in the book of Acts where Paul is brought before the Sanhedrin council, and they're saying, what have you been teaching? And why? He says, look, I've been brought before you guys today because I teach the resurrection of the dead. And half of them say, well, good job, do that some more. And the other half say, well, you ought to be dead. And they start fighting among themselves, and he leaves the courtroom, right? It's one of the stories you find in the book of Acts. Anyhow, the stories of angels lead me to think that Matthew must have had more connections with, or at least leaning towards the teachings of the Pharisees. And by the way, the average down-and-out Jews, the average person on the street, they really did respect the Pharisees. They didn't think they could do what they did. They didn't think they could live the way they lived. They thought of them as the high and mighty, and that I could never do that because I got kids to feed and jobs to do and projects around the house. But those are some good people. They really try hard. They study the Bible good. They know the Bible good.